Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we are back on the dev server having a look at some of the new vehicles in update Wind of Change, and this time we're having a look at the HMS Valhalla. This is a vehicle which is coming to the British tech tree in the Blue Water fleet for the British, and it's going to be a 3.3, it's a V-class, interestingly enough, the G45, and the closest thing I would say to is it's very similar to the Grafton in a way, with slightly different guns, but generally the same layout or the same general ideas as it. It also comes alongside the Verdun, which is basically also the V-class like the Vega, but it does once again have slightly different armaments on it. But it's kind of odd to see this one actually as a premium. I thought this would be more of a tech tree one, or maybe as a starter premium or something, because it doesn't have too many great qualities on it. I suppose if it's like a 250G premium to get people into the tree, might not be a bad idea, but it's a bit rough when it comes to the overall idea of it. So when it comes to Valhalla, it has 4 single-mounted 4-inch guns, which, you know, being single-mounted is great because it means that if one gun gets taken out, it doesn't actually mean like you've lost half your firepower like the Vega. But so the single mounts are nice. The traverse is not terrible. The fire rate is pretty decent on them. It is kind of interesting how you can see here the fire rate on these ones is 10 rounds per minute, and then on the back ones it's also 10, but the first stage is 12 rounds a minute, and the first stages, it's kind of hard to like tell where the first stages are on this thing, like how big are the first stages. I'm guessing it's these little things here. Yeah, there you go, ready use ammo. So the first stages are 20 rounds each, which won't be too bad, but it's a pretty decent fire rate for the low tiers of it. And then the secondary armament, it has 176mm, which is sat in the middle here, and that's basically it for guns. It's very similar to a lot of other machines like the Clemsons. The Clemsons really struggle for AA firepower when it comes to the game, and this one is the same in the Valhalla. So as a starting premium for people, this one is a really tough sell. It does actually have some torpedoes on it, the Mark IV torpedoes. It has 6 of them in these triangular mounted tubes, which are pretty cool. Normally you see they're just straight up horizontal 3 in a row, but the triangular ones are super interesting. And it has these massive engines in the center with 2 smoke funnels, so if you take one out, it doesn't mean that the ship's gonna be over. It still will be able to keep going. It does have 60mm of hull armor and also some shields on these guns, the 4 inches, but nothing really to write home about in that, and also taking out the bridge will be really easy to do. It only has 1 rangefinder as well, and you can see it's a pretty rough one. You know, you got the fire solution calculation time is really long. It doesn't even have 100% measure accuracy on it, which is super rough, at least with the crew that I have. And overall, this vehicle is just kind of looking like a dud, is probably the best way of putting it. Like, I don't understand why you take this thing over the Verdun. The Verdun has the same firepower on it. It actually, I believe, has better 4-inch guns. It has also some AA armament on it, and the only thing I suppose it lacks is the torpedoes. So maybe that's why you would pick up something like the Valhalla if you want to have the torpedo armament. It does get a shrapnel shell, which is always fun, but kind of completely useless. But it gets the 4-inch HE on the 102s and also the SAP. You get, as I said, the torpedoes. They actually have a pretty good travel distance on them because they have the torpedo mode, so that's at least nice. And for the 76, you get once again the HE and the shrapnel, so no HEVT or HETF on it, so dealing with aircraft is going to be a bit rough. So when looking at the general vehicle itself, you know, the speed is pretty average, the armor is pretty average, the guns are quite rough. I suppose the torpedoes are nice in a way, but it's a hell of a tough sell for this one, apart from, I suppose, maybe one factor, which is since it has these 102mm in the form of the 4 inches, it means that you can take out stuff like PT boats and coastal vehicles at, by kind of over pressuring them or hull breaking them, because anything over 100mm in caliber is able to one-shot the little machines. So maybe that's the idea that they're going for when it comes to a machine like this. and it means that, you know, you can do decent damage to whatever you're firing at. But it's one of those vehicles which really has to depend on some unfortunately little wacky things. And also, even with the torpedoes, they have a little bit of an odd bearing to them, but it's not a huge one. I mean, I suppose it makes sense. So I suppose if you're interested in using torpedoes on a lower tier machine, if you're interested in kind of staying away from the fight and just trying to attack stuff like coastal vehicles with this, it isn't, you know, the worst idea in the world. But I feel like there are just way better options which are around the place, even at the lowest tiers of the game. With Britain, they added in a really nice reserve vehicle and also a really nice premium to follow it along. And with the addition of the Valhalla, I feel like it's another step back to stuff like the Churchill, which is what we used to have before, which was a super weak vehicle when it came to the general game. At least the fire rate on the 4 inches, as we said, the first stage one isn't too bad. Could be a lot worse compared to some other vehicles. But if you've ever played something like the American Clemson, this vehicle is probably the closest idea towards that. So what'll end up happening is, if you spawn in this in first, you know, you'll be able to get some decent damage into other destroyers, you'll be able to get some decent damage into the coastal vehicles if your crews are good enough and your accuracy is okay. And then what's going to end up happening is you're going to get jumped by a plane, and it's just going to torpedo you or bomb you, and there's nothing you can really do about it. This thing really lacks the AA armament or any type of armament like that to be able to try and keep itself alive from the air. So it'll have the potential to have a pretty decent, positive first 5 minutes of the battle, and then after that point, you know for a fact you're going to get targeted, just like stuff like the Clemsons do, because of the fact that you are indeed very low on the good old AA armament. So I don't really understand personally why somebody would buy this one, unless, as I said, it is a very low cost vehicle and people are looking to get into the tree and maybe run it with the Vega. But there's already just better options than it in the tech tree itself. It's nice to see, but I feel like this should have been kind of a tech tree vehicle. It should have been put into maybe the right hand lane, so whichever lane that you go down in the tech tree, you have access to similar vehicles. And maybe this will open up other opportunities for certain vehicles, such as the airplanes to be brought in. And you can run it with some coastal vehicles, which are really good around the 3.3 area instead of the 3.7. So, you know, there is potential, but potential is really a very overused word in these times, especially when it comes to War Thunder. I would much prefer, instead of just having straight potential, actually having more firepower and a way to defend yourself against certain vehicles. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Merciless Reaper, Jerry Provolt, Mega Dino King, Professor X1718, Orange Tail, Sakoshi Tiger, Teddy, John Ryman, Universe, Eugens Terry, Ambrosius McClellan, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, Moxie, B. Young, and Derek R., Barine, Lafouche, and Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.